Every bill that gets introduced in Annapolis before the Maryland General Assembly has a fiscal note within it so that lawmakers can determine as they debate and deliberate what the dollars and cents impact on the proposed bill would be on the Treasury, good, bad, or neutral. Should the county council adopt something similar as kind of a business impact analysis on all the legislation that it considers as a matter of course, just as the fiscal note in Annapolis applies to every bill? Mr. Leventhal?
So I want to be clear, I'm running to be your county executive. I've been a superb county councilman for 16 years. The question asks, should the county council adopt some new procedure for passing legislation? I would leave that question to the next county council. I want to be a new leader for this county who takes a hands-on approach to economic development, who works with the business community, who makes sure that the concerns of the business community are heard and understood, and that we incorporate economic growth and recruitment of talent and new jobs and new investment into every decision we make. Whatever procedure the county council adopts to do that is up to them. I'm going to be leaving the county council. What I do want you to understand is that experience matters. I understand the mission of every county department. I understand in this room there's a hunger for a fresh face. It took me 3 years to be a really good county councilman, to understand the relationships between the independent agencies, park and planning, school systems, state legislature, the utilities, county government. Bill Frick is right that under the charter, the role of the executive is limited, but one thing the executive needs to understand is what agencies do what. It's not simple. This is a big, complex, multi-billion dollar operation. You want someone who really knows how to get things done for you and get results. And I will bring a culture of customer service. I have a reputation for being impatient. I don't like it when government takes too long to get an answer to my constituents. I have the best reputation at the county council for answering your phone call, for responding to your email, for making a real effort to get a satisfactory resolution to your problem, and that's the culture of customer service that I'll bring as your next county executive.
Mr. Frick?
Yes. Yes, of course, this isn't hard. Should they know how the regulations and the laws are going to affect the business community? This ain't hard. Of course. I mean, there's a news item this week that we're going to have a complete review of everything we do in local government and how it affects racial equity. Admirable. Very admirable. If we can do that, we can't assess the impacts of new laws and regulations on the business community. That's not hard. Absolutely. Should have been done years ago. But there's another fiscal note I want to mention to you. Some of you may not know about, but it's pretty exciting. It's a company. And it was started by one of our stars of Montgomery, a young man named Tim Huang, who was a student member of the board, a Blair student, brilliant kid. And he is Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year. He is building this incredibly exciting company that is using big data and analytics to predict regulatory changes and legislative changes. It's one of the most exciting companies anywhere. And guess where he's building it? D.C. Not in his hometown of Montgomery County. This is the kind of missed opportunity. Why? Because we're not attracting the young people. The young tech talent that he needs don't mind living in Logan Circle. They don't mind living on 14th Street. Remember what 14th Street was 15 years ago? Right? It was when I was a kid growing up at North Chevy Chase Elementary School, if you said, I saw your mom on 14th Street, those were fighting words, right? Now it's this dynamic place. Now mom's probably got a reservation at La Diplomat or Compass Rose or might be going to Trader Joe's. They have built an exciting culture, and we're not doing that. And in part because of our broken liquor control system, which I hope I get to answer another question.
Rose Krasner?
I remember when I first got to the planning department, I was asked to come up with fiscal impact for a forest conservation law. And I thought, what are they talking about? Forest conservation law is planting trees. And then I realized, oh, how much more staff am I going to have? And, how is it going to have a budget impact on the planning department? We do way too much of that, to tell you the truth. If we had done a fiscal analysis of raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, it probably would not have looked well for the very people we're trying to help. To be very honest, we would have recognized that jobs might actually be lost because certain businesses are going to switch to automation. We might have realized, because we jumped out ahead of the rest of the state on this issue, that Prince George's and Howard and Frederick were jumping up and down with glee because they realized businesses were not going to locate here, they were going to locate there. We should be working all along, really before legislation gets introduced, to make sure that we understand the full impact of that legislation. And as county executive, I really plan to be constantly in Annapolis. I want to know what legislation is being introduced. With the county council, I want to work closely with the county council to make sure that we're not putting in place new regulations that are actually going to keep us in the sort of position that Dr. Basu pointed out earlier this morning. Thank you.
Mr. Berliner, Councilman Berliner.
What was the question? Seriously, what was the question? Sometimes people don't answer the question and it just gets your mind going. Business impact network. So let me just make clear. It is how I've done my business for 12 years, listening to business. I have listened to business. It's why I worked so hard with our chambers when it came to the minimum wage bill. I was part of the group that said no to the minimum wage bill when it was first introduced and led to the veto so that we could bring about a bill that actually worked the best it could for our small business community. We stretched it out as far as we could. And so I called every one of the chambers before we cut this deal, and then it passed on a 9-0 vote. I know how to communicate with business and hear the impact on business. We did the same thing. I did the same thing on sick and safe leave. I turned to my colleagues and I said, Seattle exempted businesses of 5 and under. And my colleagues turned to me and said, the advocates want a bill as strong as possible so that they could take it to Annapolis. And I said, that's the advocate's job. Our job is to do right by our people. So I lost that amendment. But that is the work that I have done from day one on the county council. I bring balance to this work. And we need balance to this work. The Washington Post called me progressive but pragmatic. And I raised my hand and I said, what's with the but? You know, if you are not progressive and pragmatic, you cannot get this work done. It is how I've done my work. It is why I have led on so many different issues. It is why I hope to be your next county executive.
Mr. Elrich, Councilman Elrich.
So I'm glad we mentioned minimum wage and sick and safe because I negotiated that bill down. And I worked with Sidney Katz, who talked to me for months after the original veto to try to get to a number that would work. And I worked with the chamber and talked to the chamber about how to compromise that. Same on the sick and safe leave bill. I went back and forth between the chamber and the advocates to come up with a compromise that did not apply to all the businesses in Montgomery County, but carved out a separate tier for smaller businesses. I don't put bills forward just to say I'm putting the bill forward, look how great I am, and if I lose this bill, I don't care. I put things forward to move forward. And if it means you have to compromise and you have to work with people to get something that everybody can live with, then I work with people and compromise to get things that everybody can live with. I think that's part of governing, and I think that's the smart way to go forward. I will continue the Economic Advisory Council that Executive Legislative has today. I will probably make this more robust and have more meetings with people in the business community. Years ago, and multiple times, I've invited, for example, the Chamber of people to come and talk to me about the regulatory environment. And I said, could you put a bunch of businesses in front of me? Because you keep saying regulations, but you don't ever say what regulations. I never had that meeting because no one took me up on it. I guarantee you that if I'm county executive, people will be in my office and we can sit down and talk about it. I still want to have that meeting because you can't change regulations as a blanket box of things. You can change specific regulations that don't work. I'm happy to know what they are, and I'm happy to work with you, and I'll always work with you.
Thank you. Mr. Blair.
Well, of course we should, right? So shame on me. I actually thought that when we were passing legislation, we were considering the economic impact already. And maybe that explains the charts that we saw earlier today. So it's crazy, right? So like the energy tax. So we've raised the energy tax 700% in 10 years. I guess the thought was that businesses would become more energy efficient when we did that, right? But what happened is each business owner made their own decision. I'll go to Virginia, right? We go down the Dulles Toll Road, right? And you see all those data centers and all those high-tech businesses. Didn't work. And I'm curious, like when we were passing that legislation, if we had like the pros and the cons list, like did someone say, oh, one of the cons is Dominion Power will be sending out marketing solicitations to our Montgomery County firm saying, move to Fairfax because your energy bill will be 30% less. I don't think so, right? So of course, because the legislation we've passed has had severe, extreme, unintended consequences, and I certainly know firsthand what that legislation's been and need to unwind that. And I feel confident that if you elect the same people with the same policies, you're going to have the same problems. And I'm going to bring a fresh perspective and a business know-how to unwind this stifling legislation.